In the 5th round, Spencer Rattler went. Simple question. Will you be adding him to the taxi squad of your Superflex rosters?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's probably a scenario where I don't mind doing that. Taking him in like a 4th round of a dynasty rookie draft is fine with me. If you don't like some of the options out there, but yeah, I think that's pretty much all there is to say there.
Yeah, I think just as a blanket philosophy, it's never bad to throw these guys on your taxi squad.
Yep.
All you're hoping for is a few spot starts here and there, but if they get those, they're super useful. And then if they
I
get
mean,
any more of that, then you just cashed in.
look at Sam Howell, right? Like
Yeah,
that's a prime example of some guy going on the 5th and then having value. But
bingo. And then Jordan Travis, Joe Milton also went. I'm not going to touch too hard on Joe Milton, Wiz, but I don't think those guys will necessarily be much. But again,
no,
it doesn't hurt to add them to the bottom of the taxi if you got the spot.
sure.
Running backs. And this isn't just 5th round, Wiz, just for everybody listening. This is 5th, 6th, and 7th that I'm going to lay out because these guys are all dart throws. The chances that these guys hit is very low, but we want to talk about them anyway. So running backs that went in the final 3 rounds. Estime in the 5th to Denver. Rasheen Ali to Baltimore. Tyrone Tracy to the Giants. Keelan Robinson, who I barely even knew anything about, to Jacksonville. Isaiah Davis to the Jets. Kamani Vidal, who we really like, went to the Chargers. That's a juice landing spot. Then Jace McClellan to the Falcons, Jawar Jordan to Houston, Dylan Laube or Lob or however you want to pronounce it to the Raiders in the 6th. So I know you got the show sheet in front of you. I'm not going to rattle those names off again, Wiz, but tell me one or two guys that you have some interest in.
Yeah, so one of the names that I definitely have some interest in is we talked about him with Barrett, but it's Tyrone Tracy. I think he landed in a pretty good spot with New York there. Really it's Devin Singletary and then it's Tyrone Tracy. We saw him be pretty effective when he was at Iowa, transferred to Purdue and became transferred as a wide receiver and became a running back. So he's got those receiving chops out of the backfield. And he, in the small sample size that he did have, he made some people miss from a missed tackles force per rush perspective, right? So, only 148 attempts in college, but he was just behind Trey Benson in that missed tackles force per rush perspective. So exciting dart throw in the 4th round. I think the other guy, though, that I'm more excited about as far as being able to make a real impact here, Trav, is Kamani Vidal. He's definitely he landed in Jim Harbaugh offense. He's got, God bless him, he's got the corpse of, we'll see the corpse potentially of J.K. Dobbins there. I don't know how much he has left at this point. And yeah, I know they signed Gus Edwards, absolutely, but Vidal is one of the best pass blocking backs in this class. So I could see him even carving out a role on 3rd down, right away. And if he can show some of those receiving chops, which he did have at Troy, there's an option there. And look, he's not the most efficient guy in the world, but strong runner. So I wouldn't be surprised if this job became his at some point during this year. And if that's the, running back in a Jim Harbaugh offense, I'll take a dart throw on that guy.
Yeah, man. And that offense, that offense is going to have so much volume that he doesn't need efficiency. You know what I mean? If he can carve it out. And I'll tell you, my candle is still burning for JK. Still burning for J.K. Dobbins, Ohio State fan, and loved him coming out. So, but yeah, that candle's flickering though. I'll tell you that. I kind of like those guys. I don't know if I can agree on Tyrone Tracy for this fact, Wiz. Brian Dable NFL offenses just don't really throw to running backs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. In the Singletary years in Buffalo, obviously he's not a guy who's commanding targets. He was averaging in the neighborhood of 45 targets a season. Then we look last year with Saquon Barkley. And then we look at the quarterback play, which was shit. Look at the wide receivers, which were garbage. Saquon Barkley only got 60 targets last year. And he's a guy who should be commanding those targets, who you should be scheming up targets for, especially devoid of wide receivers. And we didn't see Dable doing that. And so that's my only thought there is that I'm not sure that Tracy's going to come in and get a bunch of rushes. So I think he's going to need to carve out those targets. That could be one of his only ways to produce. And I just don't know if those are going to be there. So that's my hesitation on, but I want it. Aside from the fact that it's on the Giants, I would love to see him succeed in that role for sure. Rasheen Ali.
Nope, you had it. Deep sleeper
Rasheen
for
Ali.
me is Rasheen Ali. Look, he's obviously 5th round guys, so these guys are pretty much all dart throws at this point. But look, I think he's got a path to be I know Justice Hill's still there, but if Derrick Henry ever went down, at some point this could happen. I know we keep saying that, but look, he's next to free. He's going to be free in most drafts. Definitely just a guy to keep an eye on if you have room on your taxi.
Yeah, definitely just a taxi guy, but shout out to Dev, one of our graphics dudes, big Rasheen Ali fan. And Baltimore is a backfield that we attach to. So even
Yep.
the third stringer, fourth stringer, at the right price, I will add that guy to the bottom of my roster because look at what happened with Keaton Mitchell last year. And he's a guy who's going to be in this offense as well in 2024, coming back off that big injury. So just like Baltimore running backs, I think that's pretty well wrapped up. I mean, Dylan Lobb, we got some truthers in the undroppables team, but he's really just going to need to carve out a ton of targets, kind of similar to some of that Tracy talk that we had there, because I don't
That's
think they're
fair.
ever going to trust him with the majority carry share. Not going to go into the UDFAs, just to mention that Blake Watson, a guy that we kind of liked as the deepest of sleepers, did go as a UDFA to Denver, kind of dirt naps him because he's buried behind a bunch of guys, including Estime, who they drafted with a 5th round pick. Frank Gore Jr. went to Buffalo. I think it's just kind of sweet to see a Gore there. Maybe like honestly, there is a world where if Ray Davis doesn't work, everything we just said about Ray Davis could translate over to Frank Gore as kind of that bowling ball carries guy.
Yeah,
But it's hard to bank on that, especially with them actually using some draft capital on Ray Davis versus not on Frank
sure.
Gore. So very interesting. I know you have a couple of wide receiver names in this group that you kind of like, Wiz. So I'm gonna I don't know if I need to lay them out necessarily. I know that you
No.
have them in front of you, but let's tell the listeners about a couple of super late round guys. Like we're talking 5th round of rookie drafts, if drafted at all. But give me a couple of those receivers late that you're looking at.
Yeah, I think the number one receiver late is, it's a guy that I've seen go drafted in the 4th, but also a guy that I have seen go undrafted as well, that I have claims in on, and it's Malik Washington. Went to Miami, and I gotta say, I saw the phone call where, like, the video after where McDaniel's on the phone with Malik, and I guess he was like bugging the GM to draft him for like the 2 rounds before. So like you always love to see that, but like at the end of the day, he's a 6th round wide receiver, but he's in a Mike McDaniel offense. We've heard rumors that Tyreek may be retiring in a couple of years. Again, it's a dart throw here, but it's one of the more fun dart throws that you can make. If I'm going to make dart throws, I want them to be attached to good offenses, that if this guy does get a shot, that with his athleticism, with some of the stuff that we saw in college, Malik Washington is a fun guy. The other fun guy, or like could be interesting guy, is Anthony Gould. He's definitely one in Indy. Again, it would probably take an injury to get him going a little bit, but he's someone. And then the last one is Ryan Flourney in Dallas. I think there is a world there where, like, look, he's kind of a bigger athletic guy. He's like over 6 feet, over 200 pounds, has flashed a little bit of times. Again, these are taxi squad guys at this point. These are some of the guys I'm keeping an eye on just to kind of fill out that taxi.
Yep, I like those names. Malik Washington was one of my faves throughout the draft process, and just seeing he
Yeah.
went to Miami, like he could be their wide receiver 3 this season. And if the
Yep.
coach is the one pounding the table, the coach is the one who puts these guys on the field. So that's nothing
Yeah.
but a good sign for Malik Washington. Yeah, I thought he was going to be up in like the 4th round of the real NFL draft. You know what I mean? But
Kind of did too.
another slider. One name that you didn't mention there is Johnny Wilson. Not the
Mm,
best profile. He was really polarizing. People liked him or people hated him.
yep.
Massive body. Don't think he converts to tight end necessarily. But I think you never know. He could give them a little bit of versatility if he were to carve out a little bit on the outside. Think of like what the Eagles have been doing with Quez Watkins as of late.
Mm.
You know what I mean? They did bring in Devontae Parker, who I think mans that 3rd wide receiver spot.
Oh
But
God.
he hasn't been one to stay on the field forever. And I think maybe in the Eagles offense, we don't love the wide receiver 3, but one of these other guys goes down, could be some big opportunity. And I think some of that just allows them to maybe push Devontae in the slot, push AJ Brown into the slot a little bit more, and having a guy who can be competent on the outside when they're doing that. And then another guy that we've talked about a little bit, and we talked about Lad McConkey. Brendan Rice was drafted in the 7th
Mm,
round of the draft, and don't know if he's necessarily going to blow up or be anything, but we know his dad was drafted super late and exploded. Not saying he's going to necessarily do what his dad did, but I think if we look at Quentin Johnston, we look at Josh Palmer, those are guys that were not brought into the Chargers by this regime. Brendan Rice was. So in a weak depth chart, we know that Lad's probably at the top. Never know with Brendan Rice. Definitely a taxi stash.